Welcome to The Lock Shop with Nielsen and Hustler, powered by Coolbet Canada.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Special Thursday episode of The Lock Shop, and you're going to get a lot more of The Lock Shop coming up here when we get to NFL season. So a nice little dose of The Lock Shop on a Thursday, and it's an NFL Futures episode. As always, The Lock Shop brought to you by our great partners at Coolbet. Sign up for an account today and use the code LOCKSHOP, and they'll hook you up with a little something from Coolbet for joining through us. And, of course, all of the odds that you see today here on this Futures episode are available over at Lock Shop. Just click on NFL Futures, scroll down, show all odds, and you'll be good to go. Huss, what's up, buddy? How you doing, man?
Well, not much. Welcome to the Peg. Big game tonight. And I know we're going to focus in on NFL Futures today, but if you missed it, we've got all of our picks for the Canadian Football League from Tuesday's episode. That's there. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Or go back and watch the live stream. Really looking forward to this football game tonight. But, man, I've had a fantasy draft. We've done a couple episodes of the Fantasy Football Extravaganza on the Lock Shop Network. And I got to tell you, I am now spending most of my free time and waking hours looking at NFL lines. I'm already on to week one, to be perfectly honest with you. But this is one of my favorite shows. Win totals, always fun bets where you can, put a little nickel down on a team before the season, and essentially you've got a riding bet for or against that team every single time you play. So, and it's interesting this year. I'd say this is more wide open than it's been in a long time. I mean, obviously, some of the top teams, although the numbers are higher. And of course, now with the 17th game, every time I look at these numbers, they seem so high. And then I remember, well, there's a 17th game, and you go and look through the schedules, and you realize why these bookmakers are as good as they are at what they do.
I think I like a lot of the unders more than the overs, at least as far as totals go so far. So we're going to give you some overs, we're going to give you some unders, and we're going to give you some division winners and where those numbers are at right now. And you want to start with the good. You want to start with the winners. You want to start with the over the win total numbers. And I've got three. Huss, you found four that you really liked. Let's break these things down. I think we're on seven. Yeah, we're on seven different teams here. No overlaps in our win totals for the 2022 season.
Well, listen, I won't go through game by game all of the schedule for these teams. Obviously, that would be somewhat tedious. However, you know what? This is really interesting, and you've seen a big discrepancy in the numbers too. You can sort of see where people are betting. Usually in and around the 122 to 137 is sort of favorites. We've got some bigger ones, which we'll get to in a minute. But we'll start off with Carolina, the lowest number on the board, 6.5. Maybe I'm overestimating Baker Mayfield because I know that he had some pretty ugly numbers last year. But to be perfectly honest, I think that he was put in a no-win situation last year. I think that he was injured through most of the year and was playing at way, way, way below 100%. And it's not too long ago that Baker Mayfield took the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs and beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in the playoffs. Like, I'm not out on Baker Mayfield. He's already won the job. He's going to be the number one guy. And, guess who they're playing week one? The Cleveland Browns without Deshaun Watson. I think they get off to a great start, and I think they can definitely win 7 games in a division where they're going to get 2 games against Atlanta. They've played the New Orleans Saints very well historically. So I'm pretty bullish on Carolina. And listen, for Matt Rule, he better get that done. If not, I know he signed a nice, juicy 7-year contract, but this is into year 3. There is expectations right now. And, of course, they've got Christian McCaffrey back. Fingers crossed for fantasy players that he can stay healthy and stick around. I like the Carolina Panthers over 6.5. The best value play on this board for me is the Minnesota Vikings. Not too often you're getting plus money on these numbers. And obviously there's a lot of people that are going the opposite way. But I'm bullish on Minnesota. I think that, Kirk Cousins, as much heat as he takes, is a guy that, has been very, very productive, takes care of the football, and has the weapons, including Justin Jefferson, who I think will be in the mix for the number one receiver in football, both fantasy-wise as well as in the NFL this year. And to be honest, you get Dalvin Cook back there. I think they've made some additions to defense, and I think that they'll benefit from Connell taking over as head coach. And again, we'll talk a little bit about the Packers. I'm less bullish on the Packers than you are. The loss of Devontae Adams, I think, is huge. I think they'll still be good, but I think that the Detroit Lions might be the team that shakes everything up. The Bears stink. They're probably not winning very many games this year, but I do think the Lions are going to be a much tougher out this year. And honestly, both the Minnesota and the Green Bay numbers for the season could depend on whether they get 2 wins against Minnesota, against Detroit, or whether they take a loss. These numbers are going to be close. I mean, I pretty much think that the Vikes are going to be 9-8 or 10-7. And I think the Packers are going to probably be right there in that mix as well. But I do love, when I saw a plus number beside the Minnesota over, I jumped on it. And we'll talk about the Vikings a little bit more in the division picks later on. San Francisco over 9.5. This is a little chalkier at -137. Listen, I know there's a ton of pressure on Trey Lance. And, it's sort of a prove it. Let's see what he can do. But outside of the quarterback position, which they obviously have a lot of confidence in this young man, this team is stacked. They've got one of the best defenses in the league. And they've got some real weapons right now. And Kyle Shanahan is a brilliant offensive mind. Just don't count on him to hold a massive lead in the second half of important games. I think they get their fair share of wins, both in the division, in a tough division. Although Seattle without Russell Wilson, I mean, that's a huge drop off. And I think those numbers, go up. And listen, I'm not sold on the Arizona Cardinals. I know they always have a great start and stink in the second half of the year. But to me, this is once again the 2 California teams, San Francisco and the Rams. And the 49ers have a great record historically against McVay and the Rams as well. So I really like San Francisco over 9.5. I guess if Lance stinks this year, that could be in jeopardy. But I would be shocked if San Francisco didn't win 10 games. I really like them at -137. And then the other one, I mean, I've been betting against the Patriots for years. But now to see their number at 8.5, I had to jump on the over. I mean, Bill Belichick having a losing season, I'm not here for it. I think that they're criminally underrated, although it's always fun to bet against them and cheer against them. I think we're crazy to not think that Bill Belichick doesn't find a way to win 9 games. Although Josh McDaniels gone, Matt Patricia apparently being the OC and calling the plays. We'll see how that works out. All I know is that Mac Jones is going to have another year of experience. I think that's going to be huge with a number of his weapons. I do think that they've got a number of players on that offense, including the tight ends that the double tight end attack that they signed, and Damian Harris, who we talked about in the fantasy football experience, that are definitely worthwhile players to get. And listen, I always think New England's defense is going to be tough. And let's not forget they're in a division with the Dolphins, with the Jets, who both, should be better. But are they better than the Patriots? I'm not sure. Bill's clearly the class of it. So I'll take over on Belichick and the Pats to have a winning season at 9-8 or better at -122. Those are my 4 overs that I like the best.
Yeah, there was 3 that I ended up liking, starting with the Cincinnati Bengals. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of recency bias with what they're able to accomplish last year in the postseason. This number is set at 9.5. So then I go and look. I'm like, okay, well, what's their schedule look like? According to the 2022 strength of schedule, they've got the 3rd most difficult schedule. Then I went and actually looked at the schedule. And they started home against the Steelers. Okay, so at home against the Steelers, obviously a different Steelers team this year. Then they get the Cowboys on the road. And then after that, they get the Jets, the Dolphins, huge game against the Ravens. And then this stretch after the Ravens in October into November, they play the Saints, the Falcons, the Browns, the Panthers, the Steelers again, and then the Titans before getting a big game on December 4th against the Chiefs. Like, to me, the Bengals could have 8 wins in the first 9 or 10 weeks of this season. So I think Cincinnati over 9.5. It's at -137 right now. I really like that. It warmed my heart, Huss, when you said you think the Detroit Lions could be a little bit of a no, they're not going to do anything of significance, but they could cause some issues, which that's all I've been asking for. Like, play the role of spoiler at least. And Detroit right now, I'm going to go on them over 6.5 at -152 as well. And, I think there's some natural progression there under Dan Campbell that'll help them take a step in the right direction. But this is also a Lions team this year that gets to play Washington. They play Seattle. They play Chicago, obviously. They get the Giants. They get the Jags. They get the Jets. They get the Panthers. Like, these are all teams that I think could kind of be right in that same group with the Lions. You pull off 1 or 2 upsets along the way, and I don't think 7 wins is completely out of reach. Do you? Like, I think that's rather reasonable.
No, I absolutely. And well, here, and just I'll mention this. I mean, the Lions opened up as 5-1, plus 500 to make the playoffs. And I think every time people watch another episode of Hard Knocks, they fall more in love with Dan Campbell, with this team, and want to bet them and support them. And I think that's a big reason why this number is minus 152.
Yeah.
And the playoff number has gone to plus 300 from plus 500. There's a lot of people are in. And Dusty, you know better than anyone, it's time for the Detroit Lions to be relevant. They're a fun football team. And I got to say, I'm a big Jared Goff fan. I never was before with the Rams. The way he's handled being traded from a team that won the Super Bowl to Detroit, to embracing it and being a part of what Dan Campbell's building. I'm hoping for success for them. I think they're going to be a real fun team to watch, and it would be a great story if they could push for a playoff spot and definitely hit that over and send their fans home happy from the Dome once in a while.
The other one, you mentioned Green Bay a little bit earlier on, and I know they lost Adams, and I'm not as high on them as maybe I have been in the past, but they've won 13 games each of the last 3 years, and this number's at 10. So even if they drop from 13 to 11, you're still going to cover this. So, if this was at 11 or at 12, I certainly would have been a little bit more hesitant, but the Green Bay Packers sitting at 10.5. I mean, is Devontae Adams good for 2 fewer games? Maybe. Is he good for more than that? I still feel like Aaron Rodgers is going to work with some of these other guys. Somebody's got to emerge. I mean, there's got to be it's the National Football League. There's got to be somebody there with some sort of level of talent. And if not, I just think they've got 2 great running backs in A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, and I think you can do some special things with both of those guys on the field on a regular basis together. So I'm gonna it's mostly a LaFleur bet, to be honest with you. I mean, he has not won less than 13 games since he took over, and before that, they had a horrible season. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers banged up there, but 13 wins for the last 3 years. I'll take them over 10.5, and you know what? Is there any way Minnesota and Green Bay both? Because I don't mind the Minnesota number either. Is there any way you think they both could end up covering these totals?
Well, if Detroit's terrible and goes 2-15 or 3-14 and basically gets swept by both of those teams potentially, and I guess having them both win. I mean, I guess if they swept, they won all the rest of their divisional games. They split between the two of each other and made the most of the rest of the schedule. I mean, it certainly is possible. Again, that's 17th game. This is the second year we've had this. Last year was so bizarre looking at these numbers, having never had that season schedule before. But I do think that, I mean, between the two, and we'll get to this in the divisional picks, I think I'm higher on the value and the upside of Minnesota. And I do think, I mean, listen, what LaFleur's done has been incredible. But I don't think they're as good offensively. So much of that was on Aaron Rodgers the last few years. And sooner or later, some teams are going to catch up. And I sort of feel that that's happening with Detroit. I mean, never not catching up, but being more competitive, as well as some of the other teams that they're going to go at it, especially in and around the NFC with the first place schedule.
All righty. Let's slide over to some unders, where there's one team that we're both on. That's Seattle under 5. And then we've got 5 other teams for you here as well, Huss. Where do you want to start with Seattle? And then we'll hit on the rest of them, or what?
Yeah, I'll be honest. The first thing that took me back when I looked at this is, how is this number only minus 102? I mean, I kind of figured that this number would be like the minus 152 or the minus 137 because everyone would be on this side. I mean, I don't really know how to put this any more clearly than their quarterbacks are Geno Smith and Drew Lock. I know they've given DK Metcalf a big number. DK Metcalf, even last year with Russell Wilson, absolutely disappeared in the last 5-6 weeks of the season. Guy's a freak athlete, great player. But I just really don't know how they are going to score enough points with those quarterbacks and the skill position players that they have to beat almost any teams in the National Football League. Not to mention the division that they're in, playing 6 games right off the bat against the Rams, the Niners, and the Cardinals. I think that they're a lock to go 1-5 in their division at best. And then I think all the other teams that are playing them, even with the schedule that they have, we're looking at that as a must-win game. So I think this is a season that the Seahawks realize that they're not going to be very good. I think that they're planning on not being very good and picking a quarterback in the draft next year. So I was stunned that this number was where it was, and it was minus 102 to begin.
Yeah, 11th most difficult schedule ahead of them as well. And like you said it, we don't need to sit here and beat it to death. There's going to be a quarterback controversy between Geno Smith and Drew Lock. Do you know how quarterback controversies between Smith and Lock work out? They work out with 3 or 4 wins on the season, as per design. Like I said earlier on my show, I was talking this week, I said, why don't you go out and get Jimmy Garoppolo? And I was like, wait a second. Why would you get Jimmy Garoppolo and win 7 games and take yourself out of the mix for one of the top quarterbacks at a huge quarterback class in 2023? It makes too much sense for the Seahawks to win 3, 4, or 5 games this year. So I love it. You're right. Minus 102. That's probably some of the best value you're going to find on the board. So we're on Seattle under 5.5. Who else you under on here, Huss?
Well, I mean, let's just stay with the shitty quarterback narrative and go to Pittsburgh and the Steelers. Now, Kenny Pickett, I'm certainly not throwing a blanket on him. He was the top quarterback picked. He's a Pitt guy. I think there's a lot of excitement about him in Pittsburgh. But as we've seen, even with the best top-rated quarterbacks that are picked at the top of the draft, playing as a rookie can be very difficult. Now, I got a ton of respect for Mike Tomlin, and they always seem to find a way to win games where they have no business doing. And, maybe they benefit. I'll have to, go and see when they actually play the Browns this year, because the loss, I mean, they've got a week 3 game against Cleveland, and then it's the final game of the season when Deshaun Watson would be back, and presumably the Browns will be a more competitive team. But man, I mean, if Kenny Pickett isn't some sort of revelation, they're either going with Mitch Trubisky, who is serviceable, I guess, on a bad team, or Mason Rudolph, who I wouldn't want starting for a CFL team right now. So I just don't see how they're, I mean, I'm sort of part of that reason is why I'm less bullish on Najee Harris in fantasy, and players like Deontay Johnson, who certainly have a lot of skill. I'm just not sure how they're going to get the ball to them. And defensively, Pittsburgh's had, they were pretty good last year, but I mean, I think back to the year before with what Cleveland was able to do to them, both in the regular season and the playoffs. This isn't the Steelers team that we remember for a long time. And I think the Bengals, as we'll talk about a little later on, are the class of that division without a doubt. So under 7.5, I'm on Pittsburgh to be go under that number at minus 112. A couple of other teams that are better, and yes, there may be a Chiefs AFC West bias coming in here, but when I look at this team, I mean, I've already said I really do think the Chiefs are going to be great this year. I think Mahomes is going to have an awesome year. These numbers are tough because this division is so damn good, but part of the reason why somebody's got to go under is the fact that they're going to be playing each other so much. And I get why people are so horny for the Broncos with what Russell Wilson brings to the table. I mean, he is such an upgrade at that position. It's incredible. And that's why the expectations are so much more. But the 10 number, listen, this could end up being on the nose. I mean, I think it's interesting that there's
I looked at this. I stared at it. I was like, I think I like them for 10. So I stayed away. If it was at 10.5, I would be all over it.
Well, and I think there's something to be said for that it's not a 9.5 or 10.5, because I mean, it very well could end up right in on this number. But listen, all of these teams, I think, certainly coming out of the gate, have a very good opportunity to be double-digit win teams. It's not going to happen for everyone. So Denver, new coach, new quarterback. I mean, there will maybe be some growing pains despite the fact that they're as talented as they are. So I'm going to take the under on Denver. You can get a much better number on Vegas under 8.5. Now, again, that says that Vegas is going to have a losing season. Would they have a losing season in most other divisions in the NFL? Hell no. But they've got 2 games against the Chiefs. They've got 2 games against the Chargers and 2 games against the Broncos. And you know what? That is going to be, incredibly challenging. And I know they've got Devontae Adams, but Josh McDaniels going in there, it didn't go great for him in Denver the first time. I really do have my doubts as to whether this team is going to kind of emerge all of a sudden as a real contender, considering the meat grinder of a schedule that they're going to. I mean, here's what the Raiders have coming up this season. At the Chargers, Cardinals, who are the great first half team, at the Titans, home to the Broncos, at the Chiefs. You got a soft one with a home game against the Texans, but then you go to the Superdome. You go to Jacksonville, not bad. Colts, Broncos, Seahawks. I mean, right now you're looking at maybe 3 automatic wins, and then Chargers, Rams, Patriots, at Pittsburgh, home to the Niners, home to the Chiefs. There are no gimmies on this schedule whatsoever, and they're playing against some of the top teams in the league. Now, there's a reason why this number is plus money. I think the logic will be, oh, the Raiders are good enough to get 9 wins. Someone is going to disappoint for these numbers in this AFC West. It was just impossible for everyone to win all these games and everyone to be a playoff team. So I'm taking the Raiders under 8.5. This is a little bit more of a value play with the plus money, and it'll be fun cheering against the Raiders. But as good as they are, I think their biggest problem is the neighborhood that they reside in, and that's the best division that we've seen in football in a long, long time.
Yeah, the other two in addition to Seattle that I've got, one will be Washington. And if you look at strength of schedule, they apparently have the easiest schedule in the National Football League. And they won 7 games last year. But in order to take a step in the right direction, they've brought in Carson Wentz. And I mean, I've never been a super anti-Carson Wentz guy, but is Carson Wentz the guy who's going to take you from 7 wins to 9 on this season when you've got, there's been good things being said about Brian Robinson, but Antonio Gibson apparently, kind of yin and yang. I mean, I'd rather have Gibson going because I think he's a legitimate weapon in a number of different ways. You got Terry McLaurin and not a lot else there for the offense. So their defense is going to have to be really, really good. And I know it potentially could be really, really good. But I don't know. I think Washington's the same type of team they were last year. And the team they were last year delivered 7 wins. And then we're going to go with a horrible season for the Atlanta Falcons. They're in that top 10 for strength of schedule. Obviously, we know where they're at with their quarterback position. I was watching Good Morning Football today while I'm sitting around the room getting ready for this, and they said some good things about Desmond Ridder, and maybe and this is a tough year for him because he's going to have 1 year basically to get the job, to hold the job, and to prove he can do it. Because if not, Atlanta's drafting a quarterback in 2023 for sure, 100%. So there's a lot of pressure on him, and he rolls into a season with what? Kyle Pitts. That's it? Like, what else are they doing in Atlanta offensively? So this is almost kind of similar to Seattle. I almost feel like this is a little bit by design. The Atlanta Falcons don't think they're going to be good this year. Are they going to get a quarterback, then get Calvin Ridley back the following season and maybe try to get things back on track then? Possibly. But I'm going to take Atlanta under. I know it's a low number, but I'm going to take Atlanta under 4.5 wins this year, Huss.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, listen, I think the Falcons are going to stink, and, Marcus Mariota might be able to win a game or two, but I think it'll sort of be Desmond Ridder gets the job maybe a few games into the season, and they struggle. They know full well where they're going, and that's to the bottom of the division and hopefully high in next year's draft. One bit, I do like the Washington pick, even though I've traditionally liked Ron Rivera's teams before, and I've kind of picked on some of their players for fantasy. It's the defensive side that concerns to me. I mean, Chase Young, one of their most important players, was injured last year. He's going to miss at least the first 4 games. I just have a feeling that if it starts really bad for Washington, they may have a tough time getting out of it because Carson Wentz is not the guy that's rallying this team behind him, I don't think, and bringing them to a much better season. They could very well also be a team that's looking for a quarterback in next year's draft.
All right, let's get to some division winners, and this is really nice. We're both on the Bengals. We go head-to-head in the AFC West, which was pretty much expected, I think, for the Lock Shop. And then we've got a couple of other teams as well. So, House, where do you want to start, buddy?
Well, let's start with the Vikings because I think it's the biggest number at plus 240, and it is the most interesting division. We talked a little bit about this before. I mean, I expect the Bears to stink. They'll steal a few wins, but I think they will be the 4th-place team in the division. And I'm expecting the kneecap biters in the Motor City to be an improved team and to be a tough out. I just really do think that we are seeing, for the last number of years, the Packers have been here and the Vikings have sort of underperformed. But as I said before, Kevin O'Connell coming in to take over Minnesota. I think there's going to be a new look. I think his offensive mind will basically use Justin Jefferson almost in a Cooper Kupp type role that will allow him to be an absolute fantasy monster, but score the points that they need to keep up with some of the best teams in the league. And I think they've done a good job quietly to improve their defense. So, I mean, to me, this number actually should be lower. I mean, Green Bay, with what they've done over the last number of years, gets almost the default pick year after year. I'm here to say that this is much closer than it appears, certainly on the odds board. And I think at plus 240 in a 2-horse race, in my opinion, the Vikes are a smart bet at plus 240. I'm definitely on them. As far as the Chiefs go, listen, we can talk about how much better the Raiders are and the Broncos are and the Chargers. They're still the ones chasing Kansas City and will be for the foreseeable future. Patrick Mahomes has never lost a road game in the division in his entire career. I mean, he has Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes has absolutely owned the AFC West, and it is not a debatable point. Now, I guess we could say that there's all that talent with the Chargers, and I get it, there is. But we've said that the last few years, and whether it's injuries, whether it's been incompetent coaching, whether it's been bad luck, they're not there at the end. And never mind not winning the division, they haven't even been a playoff team. So I think they got to walk before they run. I certainly think the Chargers are a team that gets a wild card, but I think that even with by far the toughest schedule in the National Football League, I think that actually raises Kansas City's level of play. I think they get it done at plus 165. And the one team that I think we can both agree on is the Bengals. Their run to the Super Bowl last year was no fluke. We can talk about the Chiefs' choke job in the AFC Championship game and how that happened, but the Bengals getting to that point was, a result of the fact that this team is coming into its own. I love the fact they stayed with Coach Zach Taylor. They've made some ballsy moves in the draft. Remember how everyone, myself included, killed them for taking Jamar Chase instead of Pinnell, the offensive lineman, because they needed to protect Joe Burrow? Well, they found a way to get that done. And I got to tell you, I'm a Mahomes guy, but after Mahomes, Joe Burrow is one of the most, he is just cool. He's got ice in his veins. He actually reminds me a lot of Tom Brady. And I think they're going to win their fair share of games. And I think certainly that division with the Steelers struggling and the Browns without Deshaun Watson, and the fact that they killed the Ravens last year as well. Yeah. To me, this is I'm surprised that we're getting plus 175 on this. So I really like the Bengals to take another step forward, not just be a team that had this miracle run, but be a team that probably has a home game or two in the playoffs. And people would be remembering what they did last January when the playoffs get going this year, because I think they're going to be AFC North champs, and that's why I'm taking them at plus 175.
Yeah, Bengals at plus 175. I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but we should note that they're second best odds in the division, right? Right now, the Baltimore Ravens, I think, are plus 135. So if you like Cincy, man, now is the time to get them, both on that win total we talked about a little bit earlier on, and then here in the division. I think it's – especially with Watson now, not that I'm a huge Cleveland guy anyway, but, I don't know if Lamar's got the help around him. Well, I know he doesn't have the help around him like Joe Burrow does, but does he have the help around him enough to be Lamar Jackson and lead them to a division title? I'm not sure that question is going to be answered in the first half of the season. The Chargers are an interesting one for me, and I looked at it, and, I probably don't believe in this as much as you believe in your Vikes plus 240, but I just like the value on a really good football team at plus 210.
That's fair.
if you look at all of the other divisions, I think only the Vikes and the Chargers are plus 210 in that secondary spot. I think, like, when I went through and I looked today and I just thought, the Chargers are a very good football team to be getting plus 210 in a division. And they went out last year, if I remember correctly, maybe it was the year before, but last year their defense was a little bit banged up. Not only are they hoping to be healthier, but they've also went out, brought in a couple of significant pieces, one piece from New England, then they went out and got 31-year-old Khalil Mack. I'm not too sure how much is left there, but I think he can help over what they had last year. So, they've tried to, I think offensively, it makes sense what they've done. Like, offensively, they're loaded. Defensively, they tried to make improvements. They were not good against the run last year, so that's something that they're trying to improve on if they can do that a little bit. I think they'll live up to the expectations as opposed to, as you said, Huss, having not got there just yet. So I'm going to take the Chargers just because I think that plus 210 number is a really good division number for a very good football team. And then I'm going to go with the Eagles because their only competition in the division is the Dallas Cowboys. And you know how the Dallas Cowboys usually operate. So the Dallas Cowboys are easily going to blow at least 3 or 4 games where they shoot themselves in the foot. If any of those are against Philadelphia, the Eagles win the division. It's as simple as that. I like Jalen Hurts. I'm very pro Jalen Hurts, especially in fantasy. Mostly in fantasy. But they got out. They brought in A.J. Brown. I think that offense should be, if called properly, I think that offense could be phenomenal. And once again, I mean, I obviously mentioned earlier, I don't like the Commanders. I'm not too sure what happens with the Giants, and the Dallas Cowboys will somehow, some way shoot themselves in the foot. So almost by default, I take the Eagles plus 160.
Oh, hey, any opportunity I can get plus money going up against a Mike McCarthy, I'm in. And I you know what is funny? I was listening to it might have been JMO and Low Tide following your show the other day, and they had a beat reporter on from Dallas, and they were breaking down the team and talking about the Zeke situation, and then they got to the back and forth between the Eagles and the Cowboys, and the guy said, listen, I think the Cowboys win because they have Dak Prescott, and I like Dak Prescott as opposed to Jalen Hurts. But if you take away the quarterback position, the Eagles have a better roster, have more depth, and are a better team than Dallas. And that sort of surprised me that you would hear that coming from Dallas. And, I'm a guy that, listen, we've seen some great games from Dak Prescott, but, overall, I don't know why anyone would trust Dallas, especially with Mike McCarthy after what we saw last year. So I'm here for that. I'm here for the Eagles. This could be a division, though, that something really, really crazy happens. I mean, every year, like who's
Are you about to predict a Giants division victory?
I was just about to say, who's the team this year that goes from fourth to first? It seems to happen every single year. And, if you look around, there's not a lot of other spots that, maybe we'd see that team. And I think part of the reason is that, we've got, listen, I'm really high on Brian Daboll. I think that he is going to have a big, big effect in New York. And, if Saquon Barkley can have the everybody season that he's been talking about and get going, I mean, maybe we could see. I'm just looking to see where the NFC East is. Yeah, here we are. Like the Giants are 8-1 to win the division. Now, again, that could be a toss away. But if you are looking for a long, long shot, this team inevitably, every year, it seems like it comes down to the last couple weeks of the season as to who's, going to win the division. And often it's just whoever's going to win the division is the team in the playoffs. I think Philly's better. I think Dallas is a little bit better. I'm not as high on Washington, but I don't know. Maybe if we wanted to throw a long bomb dart, maybe a little something on the Giants for the NFC East at 8-1. It's one of the biggest numbers of any teams to win the division in the NFL. Because let's face it, every single year we look back and go, remember the way we thought about all these teams going into the season?
There's always one that everybody misses on. Always. Right? Yeah. No, it's true. That's right. All right. So there you go. That's a futures episode of the Lock Shop as we start to get you ready for the National Football League season. We're going to have some announcements and details on some more Lock Shop content coming your way here in the next few weeks. Really exciting stuff. So if you've not yet subscribed if you're watching and you've not yet subscribed to the Lock Shop podcast, make sure you do. All your podcasting platforms is where you can find it. And tell your friends about the Lock Shop as well. We're mixing in the betting and the fantasy now. Really, it's a perfect place for degens, Huss. That's kind of how I view it.
All are welcome. And hey, speaking of degen, if you go to Coolbet right now and click on NFL futures, like I didn't know there was just
I want to
crank it in. There are some amazing options that folks, even if you just want to check it out for fun. You've got most losses, regular season most wins for the entire league. Obviously, you've got Super Bowl winner. And by the way, the Bills are still the favorite at plus 650. Bucks at 9-1, my Chiefs at 11-1, Rams defending champs 12, Packers 14, Chargers 15. But you've got regular season most wins, most losses, and then this is an interesting one. I spent a lot of time thinking about this last night, and I still don't really know where I'm going to go. But they have the regular season lowest scoring team and the regular season highest scoring team. So we're not talking about wins and losses. We are just talking about points. And, not surprisingly, a team like the Texans is, right at the top of the list to both. Oh, and there's also who will concede the most points. That's another one of my favorite bets. So you're just hoping a team gets lit up week after week after week. So You can, if you're bored and you got an hour to kill, head on over to CoolBet and check out these odds, because there is all sorts of interesting ones. And we'll get to player props next week, which is a real nice tie-in with fantasy season, thinking about who's going to be big, who's going to be a bust. But just for your favorite team when it comes to the division, making the playoffs, it is all there right now at CoolBet, and that now is the time to do it. And perfect time to mention that if you haven't played at CoolBet before, use the promo code LOCKSHOP, a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. Perfect time for future season and week 1 just around the corner.
Bengals right now 16-1 to be the highest scoring team in the National Football League. Same number as the Packers. And think about who Joe Burrow is throwing the ball to and who Aaron Rodgers is throwing the ball to. So the disrespect of the Bengals offense is real. There's like the Dallas Cowboys are 12-1. The Bengals are 16-1. Go get on that right now. That's ridiculous.
What are the Chargers?
That's a good one too. Chargers they're 10-1. They're 10-1.
10-1.
Yeah.
That sort of makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Bengals is 16-1 though. I like that. That's juicy.
Race to the bottom for most losses. The Texans, the betting favorite at plus 350. Falcons at plus 450. I don't know. And listen, I think Lovie Smith, he's got some experience, so he's been there before. I wouldn't be surprised if the Texans aren't the worst team in the league this year. I just think, they've got some good pieces coming in. They've got some rookies. They'll get a chance to play. I'm going to try and see. Look, the most obvious team usually does not win that bid. Although the most obvious team the last few years has just been Jacksonville, and then they got Urban Meyer in there, and we all saw how that went. But I definitely think the Jags will be better than at least a few teams this year. So maybe it will come down to Atlanta and Houston. But anyways, lots of things up at CoolBet. We'll kind of get to more of our favorites next week, and we'll certainly hammer out some of our favorite overs and unders for player props. And there's hundreds of player props for your favorite guy available for a season wager as well over at CoolBet.
We will talk to you next week on The Lock Shop.